the earth goes spinning round, dancing in the night. There's a new day, a time to make things right. Words and walls which divide us fade into the light. Take a step closer, our future can be bright. Imagine a better world, a new reality. Never wavering or giving up on dreams. Believe our pure heart can mend all that is wrong. Hand in hand, connecting hearts, and then together we stand. I dream of a beautiful place for us all. Hand in hand, connecting hearts, and then together we stand. As the earth goes spinning round, dancing in the night. There's a new day and time to make things right. Words and walls which divide us fade into the light. Take a step closer, our future can be bright. A show of kindness can change the world to inspire us on our path. Never wavering or giving up our dreams. Believe our pure heart can mend all that is wrong. Walk hand in hand, connecting hearts, and then together we stand. I dream of a beautiful place for us all. Walk hand in hand, connecting hearts, and then together we stand. Believe our pure heart can mend all that is wrong. Walk hand in hand, connecting hearts, and then together we stand. I dream of a beautiful place for us all. Walk hand in hand, connecting hearts, and then together we stand. Together we stand. Together we stand.
Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining in for all our friends from global YAD in Asia, Europe, in North America, and around the world. Welcome to this first ever public talk series from Buddha's Light International Association, Radiance Subchapter. I am Kim from Toronto, and I will be the moderator and interviewer for today's sessions. So before we begin, we'd like to extend our deepest gratitude to Venerable Master Xingyun for founding the youth group. And also, we would like to thank the Buddha's Light International Association Chief Executive Venerable Hui Chuan and all the Venerable from Fo Guangshan for their tremendous support and guidance when we received for hosting the seminar. This talk is about having a conversation around young people in the temple and how some of the temple's experiences have shaped and informed the YAD's lives, their careers, and their life paths. We're very happy to invite some senior YAD panelists here who've had extensive experiences in YAD as past presidents and in their local chapters. They have graciously agreed to come forward to share their experiences with us today. And first of all, I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have firstly Emily Su from New York. She's a
Hi, everyone.
Yes, she's a CPA and currently a senior manager with an accounting and audit firm. And the next we have Richard from LA. He's in the educational field as a very popular middle school teacher. And then we have Nathan from Edmonton, who is currently also involved in education. He is also a school trustee and a program manager for the Mental Health Commission of Canada. And lastly, we have Fabian from Toronto. He's probably the most studious person amongst all of us with his PhD doctorate degree in life sciences field. And he's currently in the life sciences industry here in Toronto. So welcome everyone. And we have quite a full agenda tonight, but we'll also like to involve everyone in a poll. So you probably see a little icebreaker icon in front of your computer. And this is a warm-up exercise. So please tell us where you're from. And the next question is, if you scroll down on your poll, it also asks if you have eaten yet. This is a common question that venerables always ask at the temple. So we thought we'd replicate this online as well. 你吃饭了吗? So if you can take a moment to answer this question. In the meantime, I'd like to cover some logistics. If you also look at the chat on your screen, there's a chat screen. Feel free to leave comments here and interact with other attendees in this session. Obviously, you can talk to each other there, but this chat group will not be monitored. And if you do have questions specifically for the panelists or for the organizing committee, there's also an icon on the bottom of your screen, Q&A. So please feel free to leave any questions you have there, and then we will take it up at the end of the session, for a few minutes as well. So we have, let's take a look at the results of a poll. Great. Most Canada, we have 53% from Canada. Way to go, Canadians. Awesome. And North America in the US, we have 34%, Asia 6%, Oceania 6%. Great. This is a pretty good global turnout, I think, right, for this time zone, especially in Asia. I think right now it's 8 o'clock a.m. in the morning. Have you eaten? Yes. 50% say yes. Not yet. I'll grab a bite later after this. And eating right now and enjoying a cup of coffee and tea at the moment. Great. Thank you for your participating in the poll. So I think we will get started. And first of all, maybe we'll talk a little bit before we jump right into our career and our life path and all these questions. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about our YAD experiences. And I'd like to start with Emily first. And maybe you can give us a little bit of background on how did you started out in YAD or your involvement in the temple.
Sure.
Over to you, Emily. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. It's good to see everyone across the world joining us tonight. So for me, my story with the temple, with the YAD started when I was, I think, around 11 or 12. My mom actually brought us, my two siblings and myself, to temple. Mm-hmm. And from there, we kind of hung out, I guess you can say, with the Venerables. And we had Saturday classes, we have Dharma classes, simple, basic Buddhism etiquettes that were taught. At the same time, we also had fun with the other kids of similar ages. And then I progressed to like Chinese school. I was there for a few years, and then progresses to like helping out with the YAD, getting involved with them through kids camps, summer camps, different retreats, different events, activities that were held. At the same time, also assisting the temple. I guess it wasn't until probably when I got into like my college years, and then when I'm working, then I got like really involved, and that's when I took the position of also the YAD president for 2 consecutive terms.
Wow. So it sounded like you never really stopped going to the temple even since age 11. You consistently through the 20 years. I did,
probably. Besides the YAD, I think I, volunteering time there also, and just going there weekly or whenever temple or the YAD has events, I will show up and help out.
Great. Wow. Yeah. Great persistence there.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's harder as well after you have going to work, is when you started work, but you try to find a balance, I guess. And, when you have that long relationship with a location, with people for so long, you just kind of automatically, I think, just would be there and show up. And I guess, and I want to say faith too, but I won't get into that for now. But
yes,
for
sure.
Yes,
we'll definitely get into it. So I'm getting that you're finding the connection and also that weekly attendance, that making friends as well, that keeps you going. So this is great. This is great.
It is. You meet a lot of big brothers and big sisters there, given that because since I started at a young age.
Yeah.
So you meet a lot of people, big brothers and big sisters, like I said, that kind of provided guidance and support for the future that you will come across, because they have that experience, and they encourage you, and they provide advice as you're going through phases in life. So it's definitely great, and I made long-time relationship with friendships with a lot of people too. So that's always awesome.
Great. Now we are going to turn into your more in-depth experience later. Now, I'd like to probably turn onward to Richard, and perhaps you can share, thank you, Emily, and perhaps you can share, Richard, a little bit about your experience. How did you start it out at the temple, and why did you come to the temple?
Okay, so I guess like my story is like very similar to a lot of like younger kids. Like your parents bring you to temple because they want to volunteer, and they're like, oh, if I volunteer, I can bring my kids and they'll become good kids going to temple. So that's where I started off. Like my mom wanted me to become like a like a good kid. So it took me to temple with her, volunteered. She took us to Chinese school. I was lucky enough to at temple find kids my own age. So we hung out there. So my early years of my life were at temple, and then I stopped going because I got older and I figured out I like to do other things. So I kind of dropped out of visiting temple for a good chunk of time, like maybe middle school to high school and maybe most of my college years. It wasn't until 2010 that I actually started coming back because an old friend reached out. It was like, hey, you want to come help out kids camp? So that was like how I got introduced to YAD. And then from there, I met some really cool people, and then we became friends. And that became like a reason for me to come to temple and then do more activities. And eventually, like I got more involved, started leading more activities. And from there, like became president, stuck around, did conferences and all that stuff. And kind of like now we just advise other YAD members. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. So you were brought back to the temple by your parents. And so did you remember that early years right before, like there must be a point in time where you feel, okay, I don't want to go to the temple anymore. Can you describe what was that sentiment? Like why and why not? And what could we have done differently?
So my temptation was cartoons, like Saturday morning cartoons. So my strategy as a child, I would pretend to sleep in, like I can't wake up, I can't get up, I'm so tired. And then when my mom left the house, it's like, oh, she's gone, I don't have to go to temple, let's go watch TV. And that was like kind of my process of getting away. Eventually, my mom caught on. She's like, okay, you make your choice, you decide if you want to go or not. So she let me stay home, and I kind of did my thing. And it wasn't until later on in college, they were doing stuff at temple, and an old friend reconnected with me. And then she told me about like kids camp, and from there I got introduced to YAD, and I knew that there was like some group that at temple that I can maybe participate in, and they did some stuff that I really enjoyed. So I kind of stuck around to there.
I think I really want to give it to your mom. She didn't force you back then and yank you out of your cartoon time and say you must go to temple, because at that time maybe you would have had a resistance towards going back to the temple back later, right? Yes.
But I was also a troubled teen in my middle school years. Like I don't want to do anything. I want to rebel. That was like my middle school version of myself.
Yes. I think we all are at some point, right? So, okay, thank you for sharing, Richard. And Fabian, back, now to you. What about your experience and how did you come to the temple? And
great. Well, thanks for inviting me to this panel. I'm also very happy to chat with all my panelists here. So I guess my story is a little bit differently. Just to give some context. So even though I'm part of the Toronto Temple, when I grew up, I actually grew up about an hour away from from Toronto, closer to Niagara Falls, if anyone knows where that is. And so my parents were not like volunteers of the temple, but we did, go to the Toronto Temple occasionally because they are spiritual. So sometimes, for Chinese New Year and other events, just to go pay their respects. So I knew of the temple, but I didn't actually join the temple until late in high school. And I think at that time I was kind of like trying to, I wanted to learn more about Buddhism, having that kind of like spiritual phase that, I guess middle-aged kids or teenagers have. And so I saw a poster actually for a summer camp. And, I had nothing to do on the weekend.
Because you were literally outside of Toronto, and where would you have seen this poster?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure. So what happened is, when we went to the temple, we would always stay for lunch because the vegetarian food in temple is always so good, no matter what temple you're going to, right? So I think everyone can agree on that. And I remember, walking up the stairs from the dining hall, turning to my left, and I see this huge poster right in front of the bookstore, and it said, retreat. So, I joined that event, and, it was my first event in YAD, and pretty much that kind of got me hooked on. But one thing I do remember is at the end of that event, I spoke very briefly with the Venerable and just saying, I'm interested to learn about the Buddhism. And she actually brought me to the library in the second floor of the temple and gave me a few books, some from Master and some from other Buddhist authors. And she was like, feel free to read these. And then, if you have any questions, come back and then we can chat at the tea house. And so basically that was kind of like the catalyst, right? Starting to read, Grandmaster's readings. And then when I was in college, I was involved with the Buddhist Light Center. So that was kind of like a school club associated with the temple.
Yes.
And so that's really kind of how I got my feet wet.
Right.
In
So you
the
were a
temple.
member then, you weren't really like chairing the BLC, but you just participated in their events through your...
So I actually founded it. But for
exactly. I just wanted to say that. Why did you say I actually happened to go to BLC? You were the president of... So,
I'm humble,
so actually, where's that connection? I do want to get at that connection because your curiosity brought you from the college, from into the temple. And then how did you want to start a BLC?
So
what
it
was
ended
that
up being
thinking?
that,
yes.
I attended that college, and then a few YAD members also attended the college.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were like, oh, well, we have a couple people there. Why don't we try something out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, it was a group effort with a couple other YAD members. Like I remember organizing, like veggie food fairs and so forth. So that's how it kind of got in. And then kind of similar to...
Was your motivation more activity-based or more discussion-based and towards exploring the theoretical aspects of Dhamma or something like that? Or
I think at that point, being new to Buddhism, I can't say that I had one intent versus the other. Probably the main intent was just getting involved.
Getting involved.
And being part of the community. Exactly.
Right.
And then from there, I joined I officially, went back to Toronto, started my studies as a PhD student, which I'm sure we'll talk about later.
We'll talk about later, yes.
Yeah. And I was became the YD president for 2 terms.
Yes.
And now along with you, I'm part of the BLIA board. So.
Yes, it's amazing because I think your story really can share with, we could really learn something from it because you're one of the candidates that maintained a heavy school load in PhD studies while maintaining and being a YAD president with a heavy curriculum as well, right? So, and we will touch on that later. So thank you very much, Fabian. And I'd like to move to Nathan right now. Hi, Nathan.
Hello. Hi.
Long time no see. How are you?
I'm well.
Is it snowing yet in Edmonton?
You know what? It
actually a question.
It actually started snowing today, so
it did.
Unfortunately,
yes.
Yeah, we're pretty cold here.
It is 0, at least below 0. Yes. Would you share with your experience in the temple and how did you come to be connected with the temple and how was that like?
Actually, my story has similarities with some of our panelists, and like many of our panelists, I was roped in by my mom, and I remember the year vividly and the age. I was 13. It was 1995. And I remember my mom saying to me, you should go to this youth meeting at the temple. And at the time, the temple had not actually formally opened. They were still renovating. I still remember what the temple looked like before it took its present form. And at that first meeting, I met you, Kim, as well as Cha Yao, so ancient history. And we were planning for the grand opening of a grand opening performance of the temple. So from that point on, I've been involved really for the next 8 years into my 20s. And I took on positions I remember at around 14 or 15, I was the social director 1 year, and I took, I led different projects. But I have to say, it was incredibly impactful at that age, because at 13, it was my first volunteer position of any kind, first opportunity to sort of take leadership. And for me, the ritualistic parts of Buddhism were probably more challenging, but what I really appreciated and really enjoyed were the young people that I could connect with, and having older sort of big brothers, big sisters that would really mentor you, and obviously all the venerables as well. So between 1995 to 2003, I took on a variety of roles, and I just remember the things that we would do, summer camps that we would organize to Banff. And we did that 1 year with actually the Vancouver YAD.
Yes, we remember that
as
too.
well.
Yeah.
And remember, and later on, writing a song actually for the International YAD conference in Malaysia, where Edmonton performed, and writing a song for our group to sing. So lots of wonderful, vivid memories, which I'm sure we'll go into later.
Great. Thank you, Nathan. I can appreciate that, especially when you say coming to the temple at such a young age. It must have been a cultural shock in a way, but shocking in the terms of from a Western, when you grow up in a Western context, going into a Chinese culture temple, everything is new, it's different, and it's very Taiwanese at the same time. But yet at the same time, it's really, it has this familiarity of something that's very homey as well. So we can explore this concept later about this intercultural sort of environment, and how do we navigate that in our lives and also in our professional world as well. Thank you for sharing, Nathan.
Thank you.
So with that, we also learned that Fabian, just now, you took, you were in college, you kind of were exposed to Buddhism, and then you kind of jumped right in, and you take this Buddhism and you went to your university, you form a BLC, a group, you started volunteering, organizing activities, and what was the major challenges then you faced when you were transitioning from these different phases, from college to your master's, to your PhD, to school, to YAD, and eventually now to work as, now you work in life sciences as I believe in sales, and maybe you can talk about what were your major obstacles and how did you overcome that?
Sure. So I think one of the main things that I vividly remember, and it's something I'll share with the group, is it was around, I'd say, 2015, 16. So I was well into my PhD studies at the University of Toronto. And so I like people in science. I was a nerdy guy, and with a lab coat.
You do not strike to be a nerdy guy. You have to see Fabian on stage. He's an amazing dancer. He sings. He plays violin. You play violin, and I saw you dancing at one point. Anyways,
it's probably Kevin Chen.
That was Kevin Chen. Okay. Well, you have to, your many faces do come out when you're in YAD, right? You do crazy things.
Yeah, I'd have to say one of the things about YAD, the really good things, is that it gives us opportunities to do things in a safe environment, and gives us a lot of opportunities and platforms. So at least for me, being part of YAD, a lot of what I did was helping organize events. So I think I was lucky in the sense that when I became the YAD president, so around 2012, Toronto had won the bid to organize like the North American YAD conference. So it really gave us like a milestone, like an objective, right? And everyone was, I don't know how people feel, but usually after these like summer retreats or these conferences, everyone has this kind of like high, like this energy of like, okay, let's go, rah, 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 right? So, and especially, having the opportunity to host, other groups to come in is something that, everyone wants to do their best in, right? So it just so happened that, I started my term, and, a new executives came in. And
okay, I'm going to pause you there for a minute. So you started your term, but you just got enrolled into a PhD program as well?
Yes.
How did you manage the two?
Well, I mean, it wasn't something that I planned, it's, where there's Dharma, there's a way, right? So it never really occurred to me to be like, oh, I'm worried about something, right?
Right.
Because something that really resonates with me is, before I started my PhD program, there was a little bit of a gap period, and I actually ended up working in the Toronto temple for a couple of months. And I remember at that time, the abbess was Venerable Yonggu. And I remember one time going in the office, and we were just, chit-chatting, and she had mentioned she mentioned to me what my plans are. And, I told her, my plan is to, apply for my PhD, and then eventually, work in the life sciences industry. And the words that resonate to me is that she said it's very important to have a goal. People have to have a goal, and it's what drives us. Essentially, is what she was trying to say. And I think at that time, like I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, right? Like, plan all your steps, have all the, all the causes and then the conditions, right?
Right.
So that was really part of like organizing that event, right? It wasn't like, I never thought of it as like a big burden. And I know like Richard, for example, also held the conferences before, and New York definitely has as well. So everyone knows that it's a team effort.
So you hustle people together, and you in a short period of time, or did you have to put your studies on the side? You told your professor, "Oh, I'm going to be busy in the month of November," or something like that, and then you focus on YAD, or you did it together.
I think the way I did it, and probably some other people did it as well, is when I was on the weekdays, school, studies, whatever. Weekends, temple was my life for a couple of years. That was really what it was. Especially around that time, helping plan events, etc. And a couple of years after that, and I think it was the part that kind of like, in terms of like, dealing with a challenge in during my studies, and where I really had to juggle that, was I was 2 years into my PhD, and I had my academic supervisor actually obtained a new job, and he said, okay, you have the choice of restarting your PhD, or you can come with me to the U.S., Wisconsin, to finish up your PhDs. And
that's not giving you a choice. In a way.
I mean, yes, yeah.
Give up 2 years of study or move, right?
Yeah, it wasn't really giving me a choice. And on top of that, that was around the same time that my father got diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Oh.
And so it was about like a couple of weeks before that, I was kind of like going through that assessment of, my father being diagnosed with cancer. I mean, I'm happy to say he's like 5 years with. Like he's past his 5 years now in terms of his progression-free survivals, which is really, really great. But at that time, I think a lot of times people just, it's something that you just have to deal with, right?
Right.
So I think
amidst this uncertainty, did you kind of pray a lot, or go to the temple and meditated? Like, what did you do? Did you supplement it with some spiritual
I think I was really, and I think this is the beauty of YAD. At that time, I would say that was the prime of when I was really involved, is around the time my father got diagnosed. And so I did have a very close group of friends, like, the YAD members, right? That were able to kind of be a support, chatting with people here and there. I think one of the good things is that, I'm very blessed that I'm a scientist, especially in the life sciences. So, I think it's common for us as a second generation
immigrants.
Immigrants. At least for me, I'm a CBC, Canadian born Chinese. And, we often, help our parents translate regular things, right? Whether it's how to turn on the TV, or, how to pay a bill online, right? So for me, it was just normal for me to talk to them about, this is what cancer staging is like, right? We were really lucky that he was originally diagnosed with a much more severe type of lymphoma called Burkitt syndrome. And I later was able to kind of liaise with the pathologist to get his biopsy re-looked at, and he got downgraded, right? So being able to like have that scientific language, I think was very, very helpful for me.
It felt like, so you were sort of there for your parents in the way that you were translating and following through with the diseases and understanding the stages, and you being there in the middle really provided that comfort and support. But that's amazing, but that takes a lot of time, I can imagine, doing that, right?
It definitely did. And I think that it, like, while I was like trying to go through all that mentally, right? It was just really nice to know that I had a support system, whether it's the venerables, because I know they also like made a visit to my father, and basically, tried to comfort him, right, during this process, which meant a lot to me, and have some other, YAD members, have good wishes. So about like after I dealt with that, it was like I negotiated with my supervisor at that time. I'm gonna at least go through his chemo treatment first, and then I'm gonna come down to the US, be able to help him through that process. And that's kind of where because I was not physically in the the temple, because I was in the US at that afterwards, I mostly served as kind of like a advisory role, I suppose, or helping here and there if the temple needed like translation and whatnot. It's easy when you're away from the temple to be easily not involved. And I think it's more and more common for us nowadays as we're, working as well. But like, as you think about all the things that you've done, it really is a family, right? So if there's anything I can say to the people, especially during COVID now, where people are like, they're distant, right? They feel like they're not really part of something. Like chat with your YAD members, chat with your venerable here and there. You've built such a solid foundation, whether it's 1 or 2 events or years of events. It's a small community and a family.
Totally. Thank you for sharing. This is amazing. And so because of that, you went to the US and you started your PhD study. And I think you were elected as a director, but then you had to, of BLIA, but you had to tell Shifu that you can't be a director because you're physically in the US, right?
Yes, unfortunately. But I came back late, about 2 years after, and that's where
you got your PhD, yes.
After I got my PhD, and I came back to Toronto, and that's where I am now. So basically, I work in the pharmaceutical industry as a medical science liaison. So not in the sales part, but in the medical affairs. So helping with like clinical trials and getting studies started, and specifically, serendipitously, I'm in oncology now, so it kind of worked out.
Cancer research, great for you, great. Okay, great. Thank you for sharing, Fabian. I think that's very very good to hear that your faith really carry you through all these, from college all the way to even after you graduated from the US, you keep coming back to Toronto. You continue to join the Toronto BLIA as a board of director now, and really are very active in all the activities here. So now maybe we'll move on over to Nathan. And maybe Nathan, you can share not a little bit, I think I'm going to focus on you right now in terms of your background, because we did learn that you kind of was involved in YAD for almost 8 years, and even as a president of Edmonton. And how was that involvement in the temple shaped and affected your life and being what you do right now? Can you kind of shed some light on that?
Absolutely, and I echo what Fabian shared earlier, and I agree with him. The temple is a really great environment to allow you to learn how to do things, if you will, to sort of acquire experiences in a really safe way. And so, as I mentioned before, at 13, it was my first volunteer role. And over the next several years, it was an opportunity for me to learn how to organize things, how to pull things together, how to speak to people. It's a bit ironic that I'm in an elected position now, because I remember as a teenager, I was a very, very shy, very nervous kid. And the temple allowed me to really come out of my shell and give me opportunities I don't think I would have had otherwise. I remember.
I smiled when you say that you're shy, because I had this image that popped up that you were very shy.
I was very shy. Yeah, yes. Absolutely. And I think that aspect is still there. But the temple really allowed me in a very safe space, come out of my comfort zone, try new experiences.
Right. Great. Now, I do want to bring it to the benefit of the audience. Nathan is an board-elected Edmonton School Board trustee. So maybe you could explain or educate. Actually, I had to learn about what that process entails when you want to get elected. But before we jump to this elected position, because I want to highlight that, because you did say that you are in an elected position. And what was it that you do to get elected to a school board in the city of Edmonton? What does that involve? And how did you get there? Why did you want to do this? You took a very different path. As immigrant kids, you're either scheduled to be a doctor, a teacher, an engineer, a lawyer, an accountant, and you did none of the above. And you decided to go into a school board trustee and be an elected official. And maybe you can shed some light on that.
So let me just say that I'm a very bad Asian son in that sense, right? I didn't become any of the top 5. Didn't follow any of those career pathways.
Right.
And linking it back to my experiences at the temple, I think it was that community involvement at the temple that really allowed me to develop some self-awareness about what my passions were, what my strengths were. And it was actually because of the volunteer work, whether it's helping shifu with something, or helping organize an event, or speaking in front of our parents, right? Or emceeing something, that it helped me really realize that I liked helping people. I liked doing community work, specifically around advocacy and helping others solve problems. And so I think I would trace it back to some of my early experiences. And so later on, after university, I began working for a family advocacy organization called Inclusion Alberta.
And that was in the 90s, right? Or in the late
No,
early 2000s?
that would have been in the late 2000s.
Late 2000s.
Not that old.
I was thinking inclusion, the word inclusion was really hype here. Everything now is about inclusion, transparency and inclusion. But back when you were saying Alberta Inclusion, a sort of family inclusion society, the word itself is actually sounded very new age. But I think that is in the context of disability, though, right?
That's correct. That's right.
And
certainly, absolutely. And language does change and shift. But Inclusion Alberta as an organization has its roots actually back to the 1950s. And for those who might be who may not know about this, up until very recently, or I would say the 1960s and 70s, people with developmental disabilities were, up until the deinstitutionalization movement in the 60s and 70s, were often institutionalized. So these would be people that would have conditions like, Down syndrome or other kinds of developmental disabilities or intellectual disabilities. And in the 1950s, there was a family movement that sort of took hold in the United States and Canada, where families chose not to actually take their babies home that might have had a developmental disability, despite the recommendation of many doctors at that time, who would often tell them, you should just leave them in an institution. And many parents did. But there were some parents that decided that that's not the life that they wanted for their child and took them home. And at that time, the public school system would not accept somebody with that kind of disability.
Right.
And so families, particularly mothers, began educating their own kids and recognizing, wait a minute, my son or daughter might have a developmental or intellectual disability, but they can learn, because at that time, the 50s and 60s, it wasn't believed that your child with severe intellectual disability could learn.
Your position there at this advocacy group, are you more of a sort of like canvassing with the government bodies, or what was your role?
Yeah, so my role was I helped families navigate through the educational system, because even today, many families will find some challenges being included in the regular classroom, right? A lot has changed in the last 10 years, but when I was working for Inclusion Alberta, that still was a challenge. And even when students are included in the regular classroom, they're often not included in a meaningful way. And so my role was supporting schools and families to sort of find the right kinds of support so that students are meaningfully included, that they're able to learn just like their classmates. And it was really from that experience that families actually encouraged me to run for the school board. It was not something that I had really thought about. I had done community advocacy work in sort of different experiences prior to my work with Inclusion Alberta, but I hadn't really thought of myself in a political role. And so it was because of their support that I decided to put my name forward in 2013 to run for the school board. And for those who are not familiar, North America, Canada, the United States, has a tradition of electing their representatives to govern the education system. And typically, every jurisdiction will have a school board. In Alberta, the interesting fact is that the Edmonton Public School Board is the first legislative body in the province of Alberta. So prior to city council existing, or even the legislature of Alberta, the school board actually had its history. So a long history.
And I also want to tell the audience that Nathan, our YAD former president, is the first racialized person for the 139 years in Edmonton to be elected as an Edmonton School Board trustee. So I think that's a very, that's a very, very good accomplishment. And so you had to canvass, you had to knock on people's doors and say, please elect me, right? And that I'd like to represent you in the school board. Can you talk a little bit about your experience there? And we're kind of running short of time, but I do want to touch on this because this is a very interesting part.
Absolutely. So it's a political role. It's not a well-known political role. So most people would know of their city councilors or their mayor or their member for the Legislative Assembly or the member of Parliament. But the school board trustee role is elected actually at the same time that your city councilor and your mayor is elected. So it's actually on the same ballot. And I had to run a full campaign. For me, I remember 8 years ago, I had a campaign team. We raised tens of thousands of dollars because that's how much it costs to run a campaign now. I knocked on I did knock on thousands of doors, probably 10,000 doors.
Wow.
Without my shoes. And it's a physically and mentally demanding experience, but I'm glad I did it. To be honest, I didn't expect to win. I was nobody from nowhere, I often say, but you never know. And this is the beauty of democracy, is that people get to choose.
Yes, it's a very non-Chinese, very mainstream city as well. Edmonton was very white about 20 years ago, and I don't know about it now, but yeah, so I think you can definitely talk about the importance of forming affinity and with people that you don't know. And I think this is a concept that we learn within the temple very importantly as well. So always making connections with people, and you have certainly take that further outside and in your role in supporting the school board in advocating for children with disabilities. So that's great. Thank you so much, Nathan, for this wonderful sharing.
Thank you, Kim. And can I just add something? I really credit my experience in YAD and my experience in the temple and learning about compassion. I think that value developing Shibeixing is deeply ingrained in me and rooted in my own values because of my experience at the temple. So I want to give credit to the many venerables that have helped me with that.
Great, thank you, Nathan. Now we'd like to move this question to Richard, and perhaps I can ask you, as your involvement in YAD after you come back, and from in college and more active and being the president, how has this involvement as a YAD president or even as a temple sort of shaped and affected you?
That's a really interesting question. So I agree with Fabian and Nathan when they say temple gives you great opportunities. It does, but I also remember a lot of the hard work that went into it. Because you're coming out of college or you're in high school and you're oh, I'm in high school, I'm coming out. But then you go in there oh, you're going to be a project leader. You're going to manage this event. You're going to do all the details. And now you're I've just got out of high school and you want me to do what? I have no experience. And that's where it kind of I think we need to recognize is that it's great experiences, but it's so hard. They're very supportive, but the growth that you make in those few years is exponentially faster than anyone else outside of temple, because you're forced in that situation, right? You guys got go, changes happening left and right. It's intense. But regardless, being able to do that with the people that I worked with, my friends in YAD, that's what made those experiences very enjoyable, because I wasn't quote unquote suffering alone. you're like suffering with friends. Like we're all suffering together.
It's really interesting because if I talk to my Canadian friends, they will be like, aren't you supposed to go relax in the temple? But you're so stressed out. Like what's going on?
But I think like those stressful moments mix in with Dharma, because for me, when I first joined temple, those first 2 or 3 years, I didn't really care too much about learning about Buddhism. But it wasn't until like later on when I matured and kind of became more serious about like my own journey through life and my own like kind of, not, I want to say mental state, but my own spirituality, did I understand like how Dharma applies to it. So I think those experiences mix in with like Venerable's guidance and like the Dharma, you kind of appreciate it more. As much as you see it maybe sometimes negatively, you can see it as like a positive thing to kind of, as you're journeying through life, like as you get older and older and older.
And then I think years later, I learned that you need these suffering to gain wisdom out of it. It's like
for sure.
Right? Like
Venerable always reminds me of a story.
You're not going to get anywhere.
Exactly.
You're not going to get anywhere if you just sit there and meditating all day and feeling good about yourself. Like so okay, great. So you sort of you touched a little bit about your relationship with the Venerables. I think you're one of the few YADs. I think sometimes when we are involved in YAD, and what really makes a huge difference is forming this relationship. So one of the relationships is having this Dharma relationship with the Venerables, because you are in a position where sometimes when you're doing certain things and activities and you don't necessarily see the Dharma angle or even the purpose of doing it. So can you talk a little bit about how did you make that how did you seek help if you need it, or if you may say it's help, but how did you kind of navigate that relationship? Because, you know, normally there will be a cultural difference, and Venerables may not be approachable, may be approachable depending on what project you undertake. And can you talk a little bit about that?
I think my approach to like getting Venerable to kind of help with guidance was when I noticed like the people I was doing stuff with in YAD were getting so bogged down by the event itself, whereas like I was just supporting and I didn't see it that way. So I'd go to Venerable and tell her like, I see these things and I hate to have my friends have these like negative experiences. Like, is there a way we can kind of help with that situation? Because I hear Buddhism is about making life better. So like, how can we incorporate, like, that's what they say, right? Like humanistic Buddhism is for the human world. It's supposed to make you happy. So like, how can Venerable help us process these events so that way we don't see it as negative, but like something that's going to like change our point of view. So it's kind of through that process, enrich our lives. Like it was through that conversation with Venerable, then we started like having more conversations about, okay, this happened. How can we see this? How can we relate Dharma? Like we have to understand that this isn't really our fault. Like there's other causes and conditions that go into it. So thankfully for that, like through those experiences and those conversations, I'm able to reflect back on my own experiences and kind of see those a little differently and kind of now approach life a little bit differently, like down the road. Not to say that I still, like it's perfect. Like I'm still having my quote unquote sufferings from here and there and now, but it's more now I can kind of reflect back and take a step back. Like, okay, yesterday was kind of messed up. What am I going to do now and tomorrow to make it better?
You know, I like it because you're one of those that's willing to share and willing to voice out your concern and your struggles, and then you seek help. I think that's important because sometimes if you don't do it and you kind of, you know, when you're in the middle of organizing a YAD activity and you're stuck because it could be that you do not have resources, you feel like you're misunderstood or whatnot, and it's okay to talk about it, and it is okay to bring it up for discussion, and that's not the end of the world. And I think that is really important coming from you, Richard, because, and I think as I think from a Western culture point of view, we're more transparent and we're more direct to the point and we'll ask direct questions. But in the Eastern environment, sometimes things are not necessarily said and let out. So when we're educated outside, which is outside of a temple, we get really confused when we come into the temple. It's like, so yes or no or yes, like what? Like we're constantly asking what. And then I think that's what's very challenging when I was going through a temple. I'm pretty sure that it sounded like you also went through similar experiences as well.
I think it's more like culturally, because like my family, like I'm from a Chinese background, so our family's like, 给面子, so like kind of give face. So you try not to show the bad and just kind of like show like, oh, it's okay. So I think being able to, and also being born in America, you kind of realize like, oh, like we all just protest and like say things that we want to say and our opinions all the time. Like it's okay, because that's how you grow as an individual, and that's how you kind of get better, because you're having those conversations. So I think being able to kind of get over that cultural barrier for myself and just realize like, hey, I just want to say this because I think it's going to benefit us all. And if you want to disagree with me. And I think we're afraid to do things because we're like, we don't want to offend. But I think because we're so afraid to offend, we're actually hurting both sides of the party, and we kind of distance ourselves from Temple. But if we're willing to kind of just open up and just like, hey, I think I'm a little tired. I need to kind of take a step back from Temple for a week because I've been working like really hard this week. I'm sorry, Venerable, like, can I come back and help on another event? They're totally understandable because they understand that our lives are work, and then we have our own things. We have family. We have like chores, I guess, like adult chores. We do laundry, make food, do all those things. But yeah, just being very open to it. I think that's what creates a stronger relationship, and also like a stronger grounding with Temple and with like Buddhism itself.
Yes. And I think that comes from having that trust, the trust that someone has your back and that they understand. And this only happens when, you know, even misunderstandings happened in family as well. But having that open bridge of communication is very important. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So I know that, you know, when you were going through life, you went through a few twists and turns, and one of your major challenges was finding your life direction, if I may put it that way. And would you like to share, and what was that challenge and how did you overcome that?
So as a troubled youth, I didn't want to do what my parents wanted me to do. So my mom was like, oh, go be an engineer. Your uncle's an engineer. Go do this, go do that. Like do things that are going to like make you like successful. And I was like, no, I'm going to do my own thing. Went to college, just kind of just coasted by. By the time I graduated, I didn't have anything I wanted to do, and nor did I have anything lined up. So I was kind of aimless. And then I realized like, oh no, like I'm aimless. I got school loans I borrowed. I need to pay those off. So I started taking like extra classes on the side to kind of postpone the loan payments, which is like a very bad idea because you should be working. But again, I like to make my own mistakes. That's just, I don't know why. Like my
appreciate
mom
your
will suggest
honesty.
things. Yeah, like my mom will give me good advice, but I tend to let it go out the other ear, and I'll just do my own thing, and she'll just say, I told you so at the end. That's our relationship right now. So I did that, got into like community college, did some classes, was aimless for a little longer. For like another year or so, I found a job, eventually finding a job doing insurance. Like I worked at an insurance agency, and I did that for like a year and a half. And then during that moment, as I was working there, I had like a quarter life crisis where I started to reflect about like, is this the job I want to be in for the rest of my life? And I started wondering like, what have I done with my life? I've left school, graduated, messed around for like a year and a half. Now I'm here, and now I'm working, making money. And then, but this is not, I don't find fulfillment in that. So for a good chunk of time, I was sad because I was stuck at where I was, but then I was trying to find that way out. And I was still like trying to find myself in that sense. And I think now that I'm older, looking back, I think it's my attachment to this idea of like what a perfect life should be. Go to school, get a job, get out, start your career, have a family, and like grow old and pass away. Like that's what they tell you should be doing. But I think because I was so attached to that idea itself, that brought me sadness. But I wouldn't have it any other way. Because of that moment, I was able to kind of recognize different opportunities that came up. So luckily, after a year of working in insurance, a friend came by. I was like, oh, hey, I want to become a teacher. And I was like, oh, that sounds really fun.
Can I pause for a moment? Because I work for the insurance industry. Insurance is a very great industry to be in. It's
for sure. I think it's a wonderful industry. Like,
yes, I don't
think it's a bad, it just wasn't my fit. Like, I don't want to say like insurance is horrible. Like insurance is great. It's like, I was helping people in insurance, but at the same time, I didn't find the fulfillment I wanted. And again, that goes all back to like my interpretation of what I was looking for. And I think I was just very immature at that age.
But you weren't really, like you were 22? Were you 22?
I think I was 23.
You were 22.
So I didn't get my first job until like I was 22. So like a year and a half of 21 to 22, just like trying to figure stuff out.
Okay.
So got out, friend came by, he's like, oh, I want to be a teacher. And then Shilai Temple was like, because that's a temple in LA, they're like, oh, we have like a summer enrichment program. Do you want to come work here part-time? I was like, oh, this would be perfect reason for me to quit my job, start this career in teaching. And like, so I jumped on the opportunity as soon as I can. So went to there, did enrichment during that summer, looked into teaching schools, like programs.
Okay.
So
So I want to pause
for
you for a minute. So the temple has employment opportunities that you find enriching and useful. Can you talk a little bit about that position? What sort of enrichment program, and why did it attracted you from this insurance job that you were doing? I mean, I kind of know
because
why,
this was,
yeah, direction, but why
well, because
Shilai
Temple's always super nice. Shilai Temple, because it was an opportunity. They're like, hey, I heard you want to go into teaching. Why not just come try it out over here? And like, we have positions open because during the summer, they have a summer program where they have two teachers and tutors come out and they do enrichment in math and English. So I was lucky enough to do both 2nd and 3rd grade, which is like totally different from the age group I teach now. But I did that during the summer, kind of got my feet into the water about like what teaching is about, how can I go about teaching, learning like the relationships needed with kids and how to manage a classroom and all that. So that was an opportunity right there because they had openings because they usually hire outside people, but they were like, oh, you're a YAD. We want to give you an opportunity here too. So they gave me that opportunity at the temple.
I see. So you went through formal training for teacher college after that experience with Shilai Temple, and you are now a math teacher and English teacher, or math teacher only?
Strictly math, and now I teach only 8th graders. So big 5-year difference.
I see. So if I could ask you, because I do understand that in North America, in a classroom or general hierarchical, we're very flat. So do the students call you Richard, or they call you Mr. Young?
Yeah, not doctor. It's Mr. Young. It was weird. It was a weird transition because at Temple in the beginning, when I taught there, they were like, Mr. Richard, Mr. Richard. But like going into like public school, they call you by your last name because it's more formal. And I think, and I like it that way because it kind of shows that respect, like teacher-student relationship. Like I'm the teacher, call me by that formal title. So they call me Mr. Young in the classroom, yeah.
Oh, I see. And you enforce that, I would imagine.
There are times where a kid might say my name and I'll give him a look, like a dirty look, like, hey, like that is not your name to say. That is for me and my family and friends and adults.
Interesting.
But not in that way. I'd say very like more proper.
I can share with you one experience where I was teaching this grade 3 and 4 on how to do money concepts. And it was the most horrific experience because I had the best of the intention to go in and teach, thinking that I can make these kids understand money. But I lost control of the class in just 10 minutes, and these kids got up and walked around. It was the most chaotic class I've ever been. And I came out of it after 40 minutes, completely drenched for the whole day because I took off work for 2 hours thinking I can go back and work for the rest of the day, but I have no more energy. So I'd like to ask you, when you're teaching from full day and you have all these kids how do you match your energy to them and you're on all the time, day in and day out? Like, how do you manage your energy level? I can, that is just face to face. I'm like totally drenched for like 40 minutes. How do you manage?
I think, so when I think about that, I think like our parents, will pretend to be excited for us from morning till night. So if they can do it from morning to night, I feel like I can at least put up a front. If I'm tired, I can put up a front and just be excited. Because at the end of the day, like Temple talks about like good infinities. Like you want to create those good infinities so they buy into like what you're teaching. So as soon as you break those infinities, like why do they care? You're just like another adult in the room that I'm going to see for an hour. I can just like do what I want, get out of here, go to my next teacher. So I put up that, like not front, but that energy out there. So then they know that I care and they feed off of that. Just like our parents put that on for us because they put that on to show that they love us. So we kind of feel that love that way. So I think that's what drives me to just kind of keep going and putting out that energy for them.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing. And you do see the difference for the ones that you made an intention to put an energy to want them to learn, even though you're only doing something very mathematical, right? It's just lay it out, that these are formula based, but you do need to put in that energy out to ensure learning takes place.
Yeah, but not to say I do it all the time, because there are days where maybe the previous period has like drained me a lot, and that's where like I'm very open about how I feel. So I'll tell kids like, my last period did this and this and this. I feel a little drained. Give me a few minutes to kind of recoup, and we'll get going. So as long as you're very honest, I think honesty is very important. Building that relationship and communicating that, I think kids appreciate it, because kids don't want to be felt that they're seen as dumb and not aware, because they're all aware of like what's going on. It's just being honest about that's very important.
And I really want to touch about COVID-19 actually. And we all know that education system around the world is just put in flux right now. You're obviously delivering school and curriculum online, virtual, you're teaching virtually as well. How has that affected you or your colleagues in general?
It's so hard, like,
yeah,
because you have different, and this is where causes and conditions, like this idea of it, like this Buddhist idea of causes and conditions really like shines in my mind. Yeah. Because I could teach online, I can do a very good explanation, provide a very good activity. But at the end of the day, if a kid doesn't have the right internet, if they have other family members at home sharing the internet bandwidth and they're eating up that bandwidth, or a kid might have like a sibling that's crying in the background, there's different causes and conditions that affect their learning. And I can only do so much from my end of the screen to get them engaged. So being more compassionate in that way, and being able to recognize that I may do my best, but there are other conditions out there that I have no control over. So I could be upset, but at the same time, I have to remind myself after being upset that this was something I couldn't control. I can only do what I can from my end of the screen to kind of help them out.
Great, great. So as a teacher or your profession, if I may ask, what is your biggest fear?
My biggest fear is when kids realize that I'm the adult and there's only one of me and 36 of them, and they can do whatever they want.
I know, that would be a nightmare, isn't it? Okay. Great,
like just
great.
chaos.
Chaos, I know. It is
like
hard
my
to
biggest
control.
fear right now as a teacher, I think, is for a kid to feel like I just don't care. Because I think that can be easily come across. Because then you could just ignore a kid. They may feel that moment, for all you know, might plant the seed of like hatred, or what, not hatred, but disdain for you as a person because you've ignored them. So I try my very best. Like Buddhism, like Temple talks about, like, you gotta plant the Bodhi seeds, like plant the seeds. You may not see it grow now, but it'll grow later on. So just kind of trying my best to try to get to every single student. And I may not see the effect now, but hoping, fingers crossed, that 2 or 3 years down the road, that will fruit into something that's going to affect them later.
Great, thank you. It sounded like you're a really good teacher. I wish I was in your class.
Oh, I am okay. Like, I'm only into my 6th year of teaching, and I feel like I'm still learning how to do stuff.
Yeah, really, it's about 用心, right? It's connecting them with that, sincere intention. Thank you for sharing, Richard. That's really great and insightful as being a teacher for those of us who wanted to go into teaching.
Yeah.
So, and I have the next question. Obviously, Emily, you carry a super busy load, and we share a common training as accountant. I do know the kind of busyness you get. Perhaps you can share with us what was sort of how did the involvement of Temple shape and affected you, and what aspects of the Dharma you find most useful right now, as you had continued through your path from age 11 all the way until now to still go to the temple weekly.
So now before, I guess, college and before working, as an auditor, it was going to temple was about fun, joining the YAD, hanging out with friends that are same age group as you are. But I think there was a turning point in my life. I think when I was 13 or 14, I had a health issue. And the doctors had no idea. There was a lump in my throat, in my side of my throat here, and the doctor did not know what it was. My parents took me to Western doctor, Eastern doctor, and no one can really tell me what it is. And the only way they would try to do is probably do like a biopsy. And usually when you hear that word, it's like, the big C word. And it was scary, and knowing that like no one know what it is. My mom got really worried, and she thought about taking me to temple one day and like asking Venerable for some sort of help and like or guidance on what we can do. And the Venerable at the time actually made a recommendation that like, you know, maybe you can pray in front of the Compassion Bodhisattva and, you know, make a vow of something that you would do to change something about like your lifestyles or what you would do. So to try to maybe get the merits of making that vow to be granted, so it could kind of alleviate my health issue. And lo and behold, like within 6 months.
So you did that when you.
I did that, yeah. I
you just followed. You never questioned. You just did whatever you were told.
Yeah, I was like kind of. I think at that point it was just like whatever works, and and you know, and I've been to temple for a few years now, and you know, I somewhat believe in it, and you know, although I probably didn't really be very active about it with the chanting services, it's more just about having fun. But so I did, and within 6 months, the lump was gone, like miraculously gone. The doctors, they're like, "What happened?" We're like, well, I didn't go the whole story about telling them what happened, and they're like, yeah, it's not there anymore, and there's no traces of it. So I went back to temple. I guess like, you know, thank the Bodhisattva for the vows. And then like I made promise that I will continue that for the rest of my life, you know.
Wow,
and
thank you for sharing. This is so deeply personal. You must be relieved, but at the same time feel really blessed.
Very blessed. Well, fearful because of what it was, and but blessed that there was the Venerable to kind of guide us through that dark time. And then that, knock on wood, I'm still healthy, and everyone around me is healthy. And then I think that was like that really what turned me into like being more active with the chanting services, being more active about getting more knowledge about the Dharma, and kind of how to implement that in my daily lives. And like, you know, and then I guess I think over the course of the years, I also see how myself changing, my attitudes, my behaviors. And then like before, I guess like, for example, like I was impatient with anybody about certain things and situations. But now entering the working world and knowing that like that is important to have, especially at a position that I am in right now, that you need to provide these to like the younger generations.
When you're mentoring your staff, right?
Yeah.
So so you were after school, right? After university, you also before you got in your audit, you also had to go through an exam. And can you talk about your process of becoming an accountant? I understand that is quite a challenge.
It's a process. That was definitely a big obstacle, and affected me career-wise and affected me personally too. So I don't know if a lot of you know, but CPA exam is one of the top difficult exams to pass. And there's 4 parts that consists of the CPA exam. So, and there's a time restriction on how you pass each part. So once, if you don't fulfill the 4 parts in that time restriction, it gets expired and you have to restart all over again. So that kind of what happened to me when I graduated. When I took some of the exams, and I just procrastinated. I think a lot of us all do that quite often with projects and schoolwork and everything. But and then I realized that procrastination is what's preventing me to achieve that goal. And what really hit me hard was that I got to a point in my career, in my workplace, that you can't be promoted further if you don't have your CPA exam. So I got left back, I guess you can say, a year because I can't make manager without the CPA exam. And that really brought me down. Like, I didn't blame anybody. I blame myself totally for not being able to get that done when I finished college.
So for the benefit of the audience, so basically in an accounting firm is that you can continue to work, but then you work full time, but you're expected to pass this exam on the side.
On your own.
On your own, right? So,
Yeah.
listening to it, I totally understand that stress because you're often being pulled into multiple projects, working exuberant amount of hours, right? And then
Correct.
on the side, having to write your exam as well.
Mhm.
But I think there was a point where you realize that, because I have a feeling that you're the kind of person that will answer to people's requests first and you do your at the very end, and the exam is my thing, then I'll put it off, right? And so that
Exactly, yeah.
procrastination is really from not knowing how to set boundaries. As I hear.
Yes. I think a little bit of a time management probably.
Mhm.
And then I also realized that I probably don't know how to say no to people. I first started the career, I think I was like probably only Asian in the workplace. And then you don't want to make a bad impression. You want to
right.
Prove myself that I can do all the work. And so like, it was hard to say no because I want to make sure I'm helping people. I don't want to create a bad impression of people, for myself around them.
Yes.
And so I think it was, and then you have to do all of that on your own, on a separate time.
Yeah.
You got to take off vacation time just to study for the CPA exam. So, but I have a mentor at the workplace. She really pushed me very hard. And the moment that I heard I got the last part pass, I was at a client. I was like dancing, I guess you can say. I ran to my client who I'm very close with, and I told him I passed, and he was very proud too. And I called my mentor right away.
Right.
And that's it. I was promoted.
Yes.
That was really the only thing holding me back. So I told all the recruits right now that I'm interviewing for entry level.
Yeah.
I tell them that don't let this hold you back. You got to get it done.
Got to get it done.
Yeah.
Right.
You got to get it done. Yeah.
It's
Push yourself if you have to.
Yeah,
it's not easy. It's not easy. And plus, as you get promoted, right? Once you climb through the corporate ladder to the positions that you are in, there are a lot of more duties and responsibilities. What comes with the title comes with great power that you probably have to conquer. So it's just not much time, and you don't want to waste your holidays, your weekends just to study for the exam.
And it's really interesting when I was articling as well, you get paid with the amount of hours that you worked. It's lower than minimum wage, and you're expected to dress like you make millions of dollars, which I was constantly I had no money. I had to study.
Right.
And like we really had it made, but we're calculating in our calculators millions and millions of clients' dollars. It's not ours. We're like extremely poor.
I know, it's crazy. And they're always fighting us about the fee. Like, hey, can you lower it by 5%? It's like, you make so much money. How's that? Comes
from our pocket. So okay, great. So what would you also, you also observe a little bit of, I hear that you mentor staff and young auditors, right? So for someone aspiring to come into the audit field and the financial accounting field, what would you tell them, and what would they need to strive to be successful in this area?
Probably a couple of things. I think what's the most important is be communicative. I think in the audit world, I'm sure a lot of the workplace are like that. We work as teams. You're not just on your own doing a project or doing an audit on your own. So I think being communicative, working together as teams, it's a good mentality to maintain, and you can delegate work, and it's less of a pressure on yourself as well, and making sure that everybody have the same timeline as you are expected to have, so everyone knows you're on the same page. I think also being personable, being friendly, giving a smile, something simple as a smile in your workplace also is just a great plus to have. And just because audit work is very interactive, and a lot of people think auditors are bad, are terrible, because we come and look at your books, we check your numbers, and we do that, but we are also very nice, friendly people as well too. But there's a traditional ways of people thinking like that. But the other way is that the other one is always ask questions. So don't be afraid that you don't know anything. That don't be afraid that you don't know how to do this test, and then someone explain it to you and you still don't want to get it. It's okay to ask a lot of questions, because we know that by asking questions that you want to learn more, and you want to be able to understand the client's business, how the company works and everything. And then the last thing I want to say, just be open about the people that you meet, create networks, create connections is definitely a great opportunity for you in the future as you want to become a partner in the CPA firm, or going off to do your own business in the future, let's say. So I think creating that network, because you never know who's going to help you in the future. That person may just be your next customer or your client. So I think creating connections and the networking is definitely a good plus things. And it creates good affinity with you and other people too. Like I know a lot of us all spoke about like good relationship, good affinities. I think that's very important because like good karma will give you like good benefits for the future.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I do hear that a lot of young people nowadays is that, it's very interesting. I don't know, Richard, if you share the same thing. I did hear from my nieces and nephews is that the teachers now tell the kids and say, the job that you will be doing has not been created yet, but you just need to learn whatever skills that we teach you, but we don't know what you will be doing, but just learn it and be good at it because, the job will come. Is that a message you tell your kids? I saw Nathan nodding, as well. Maybe Nathan has something to say.
I think like what I tell my kids, like when my stints towards the end of the year is like, it's okay to not be stuck with your plan. Like we all have grand dreams and we want to do something, but I think it's okay to, at the middle of it, be like, okay, it's not working. It's okay to like switch. Like I think we're so concerned about perfection that we're afraid to switch, that we feel like we failed because we didn't do what we set out to do. But I think the idea of just like, it's okay. It's like part of a process. Like my journey to become a teacher was like all over the place until I eventually got to teach. And I didn't even know I wanted to be a teacher. Like I didn't think it was my calling until maybe 3 years ago. Like I've already been teaching for 3 years at that point.
Right.
So I think being able to accept change, like impermanence.
Right.
Like they talk about impermanence a lot at Temple.
Right.
Like accept the fact that it's not going to go as planned. It's going to be okay because change is either going to be bad or good. Like it may go bad sometimes, but also be good.
Exactly, but everything is a stepping stone to the next thing. But you just have to 照顾好你脚下的东西, right? 你脚下的每一步, like take care of what you're doing now, living in the moment and perfect it. It will lead you to another place, right? So I think Nathan, I think you had something to say, and you had this big smile on your face. Let's hear from a school trustee. What's your view of that?
It's funny because at one of the high school graduations, that was my message when I had addressed, I think the class of 2019. We didn't get to address the class in person this past year, but the class previous to that. So, and one of the statistics I quoted is actually from a report that McKinsey had produced, and that is by 2030, 800 million jobs will be lost to automation. And that 80% of jobs of the future in the next 20 years do not exist today. And so most kids who are entering kindergarten now, by the time they graduate high school and go on to university, if they choose to, will be working in fields that don't yet exist. And so one of the things that
we have to bring everyone back to have a forum on this, and let's discuss this.
Absolutely.
Nathan, this is such a big topic that we should address as YAD, and how how we talk about it. Sorry, yes, Fabian.
Yeah, I was just going to add, because since we're talking about working in jobs and skill sets that we're not really necessarily trained for, I think that's really kind of the value of the Temple as well.
Totally.
Not like, yes, we're studying, education or accounting, etc. But when we're doing these events at Temple, one of the things is that there's so many translational skill sets, whether it's project management that Richard, talked about, just basically thrown in, right, to organize a large event or being a teacher, right? But, or like myself, me and you often sometimes are MCs, right? Like, so the public speaking aspect, right? So I feel like a lot of especially nowadays, people are often, taking more and more education after because they can't find that initial job, right? But if they are part of the YAD and have organized events, little do they know that they have project management skills, public speaking,
intercultural
finance, possibly, right? Exactly, right? Yeah. And so I mean, it's really in retrospect now that I think about it, right? Like, because now when we go to interviews, we have to talk about all this stuff, right? So,
Yeah.
but like, it really is something that, comes up, and people should be
Yes.
proud of when they're involved.
Exactly. Even for example, this seminar, it's a cross-border collaboration between U.S. and Canada.
Yeah.
And we joked about, we U.S. Canada don't get along on the foreign trade side, but we get along in BLIA, so no problem, no issues there. So, okay, great. So we are really tight on time, and I really want to thank all of the panelists here today for your exciting sharing. I think we have a PowerPoint to share with everyone of all your past involvement in YAD. Let's take a look. Wow. Wow.
Great memories.
Great memories. Yes. Yes. Well, this almost comes, brings us to almost like the end of our session. And, there's a common theme of all of us coming together after our YAD days. Even, it's really, the temple is really what binds us together as a family. It's how we all show up, or, ourselves with all these stories, and it's just we just come through for each other. So it's I think we hope that you have find some inspirations from these personal stories, and that you can draw on. And please know that wherever you are, you're never alone in your own journey. And when you're tired, you can always come back to the temple, speak to a venerable. It is a place that someone will have your back. And I want to close with, in 2016, at the BLIA World Assembly, Venerable Master had a very inspirational quote, and it was really translated by Venerable Miao Guang. But I always come back to this quote whenever I felt challenged in life, and I'd like to share with you. So Venerable Master said, when you find faith in Buddhism, what is most important is that you find faith in yourself. And you can even relinquish your faith in Buddhism, but the only faith you must not relinquish is that of the faith in yourself. You must believe in the fact that I can, I'm capable, I'm able, and I will, and therefore I have hope. And so it is a very simple message, nonetheless, very empowering teaching. So this message has been really dear to me, and I'd like to share that with you today. And before we end, we again want to extend our deepest gratitude to Venerable Master Xingyun. And also we'd like to thank our Buddhist Light International Association Chief Executive, Venerable Hui Chuan, and also all the venerables from Foguangshan Temple for their guidance and support and encouragement for YAD and even us now as Radiance. So finally, I want to thank all the background support we received from Radiance Executive. As you know, there's Karen that's running the IT, there's George, there's Frank who's monitoring everything. Of course, there's our beloved Jenny who's doing all the background connection with pulling everyone together. This is the first series of public talk organized by Radiant, and we will have a next session. The next session will be in Chinese. It's scheduled for Saturday, November 28th at 8 p.m. New York Eastern Standard Time or Toronto time, or it's simultaneously on Sunday, November 29th in Taiwan's time. So thank you again. Please save this date and we will be in touch. And we also have a Facebook page. You can feel free to share, like on there. And if you search us, Radiance, we are also on LinkedIn. We have a LinkedIn profile if you have a work profile that you'd like to be connected with us. And again, if you like to know about Fo Guangshan, if you're not from Fo Guangshan, there's a website is www.fgs.tw.org. That's the global website. From there, it has a slew of information. You can go through our global temples as well. So thank you again, everyone. I wish you a very happy evening, morning, wherever you are. If you haven't eaten, as we saw in the pool, please go ahead and have some food. And,
Enjoy.
Enjoy. Okay, thank you for all the panelists. We will be in touch later.
Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.